Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the meeting back to order or disorder, depending upon your opinion. We're going to start. We have a policy that members of elected officials, because they're doing public business and have other responsibilities, that we call them up first. So if you signed as the first line of the sheet, I don't want you to feel offended, but that's just a long-standing policy we've had for those doing the public's business. So I'll start. We're going to have 3 minutes. We have a light system down there. When it hits red, that means that it's time to stop your testimony. The chair reserves the right to allow a further extension of a few seconds or minutes if, in fact, what you're saying is judged to be important for the commissioners to hear. But please don't abuse it. Okay. We're going to start with Daniel J. Wayland. So Daniel, please give us your name, and I know you're Congressman Peter DeFazio.
Right.
You're not him, but you are his staff.
Chair Finley, Commissioners, thanks so much for having me. My name is Daniel Whalen. I'm the Congressman's District Director based out of his Eugene office, and he wasn't able to be here today, but he asked me to read this letter on his behalf.
Okay.
Dear Commissioners, I regret I cannot attend today's meeting regarding the consideration of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife proposed wolf plan. However, I wanted the opportunity to express my strong opposition to the draft proposal. I will focus my comments on two provisions within the proposal I strongly oppose: allowing the public to participate in controlled take, and once again allowing USDA Wildlife Services to be part of the ODF&W livestock depredation investigations. I ask that these provisions be struck from the plan. Controlled take is defined in the plan as responsive hunting and trapping when required for management purposes. The department is contemplating allowing public and private hunters and trappers to assist ODF&W in its management response actions. This is an appalling idea that will result in, at best, baseless killing of wolves. It could also result in bad actors intentionally killing wolves that pose no threat. Additionally, the plan does not take into consideration how to hold members of the public accountable should they exploit their authority. As you know, specially trained ODF&W wildlife management personnel have mistakenly killed wolves. To allow untrained public to take part in the management actions is irresponsible. As you know, in 2010, ODF&W ended USDA Wildlife Services' involvement in investigating and confirming livestock depredations. ODF&W rightly concluded that the Wildlife Services has a track record of indiscriminately killing wildlife, especially wolves. Additionally, their methods and use of poisons and other lethal devices has caused the deaths of hundreds of non-targeted animals such as dogs. In 2017, a Pocatello, Idaho teenager was playing with his dog merely hundreds of yards away from his home when his dog activated an M44 lethal predator control device placed by Wildlife Services. His dog suffered a cruel and painful death, and the boy was nearly killed, saved only by the direction of the wind. Throughout my entire career, I've worked to expose and defund USDA Wildlife Services. It would be detrimental to the wildlife and the reputation of ODF&W if this rogue, irresponsible agency was allowed to once again take part in depredation investigations. Finally, I want to echo Governor Brown's opposition and reiterate my own strong opposition to any endorsement by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's misguided proposal to delist gray wolves across the lower 48 states. Sincerely, Peter DeFazio. Thank you.
Hang on a minute. Thank you. Any questions or comments? One of the things since your letter was written that I just call to your attention is that incorporated now within the plan that we'll vote on are 3 sections, and they relate to controlled take. But every one of them now has been amended to say use of controlled take as a management tool requires commission approval through the separate public rulemaking process. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a check and balance.
Right, I noted
On
that in the
us.
presentation. I'll let the congressman know that
Okay.
that has been amended.
Yeah. So I just bring that to your attention.
He'll still have his
Yeah.
objection to it, but we'll not let him know about that.
One other thing. The Senate is about to confirm a Trump appointee as the Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Robert Wallace. I've known him for 40 years. He's an outstanding person, and he is a friend of conservation. We're lucky that he slipped under the radar. But anyway, I would reach out to him because he will be making decisions on the federal delisting in Oregon and other places in the West. And he's a good person. Actually, he was endorsed by the National Parks and Conservation Association. So anyway, just leave you with that, Daniel.
We will absolutely reach out to him and touch base with both
Yeah.
senators about that.
Yeah, he's going to have he has bipartisan
Great.
support in the Senate, so I don't want to get too effusive about his green credentials because he'll withdraw the nomination. But you heard it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next person.
Chair Finley,
Yes.
just a point of information. You're talking about amendments that are going to be proposed.
They are proposed in the document.
They're already in the document in total. Those are already in.
Yes.
That, so,
Yeah.
I want to just clarify that those are in the staff proposal as presented.
Yes.
Because they are later changes, they're not in the actual document. And so if you
I just
wanted,
wanted everybody to know that
Yeah,
these are new. Okay.
yeah, and for
Okay.
the commission to know that they're on addendum 1, and so that's how you would incorporate them, is by saying your.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, Todd Nash. County Commissioner Todd Nash. Welcome, Commissioner Nash.
Thank you. Chair Finley, members of the commission, Deputy Director Hearn. I'm Todd Nash, for the record. I'm a Wallowa County Commissioner, live in Enterprise, Oregon. And I am here today to represent not only Wallowa County, but the 10 Eastern Oregon counties that make up the Association of Eastern Oregon Counties. And the 3 comments that I submitted to you were also, the first 3 were also adopted by the 36 counties that make up the Association of Oregon Counties. And noted there, that was a unanimous vote with Metro well represented there. These principles that I've laid out have also been adopted by the Oregon Cattlemen's Association and the Farm Bureau. And without further ado, I'll just step into those. The first thing we want to see is the normalization of wolves as a predator. And with that, depredation calls be made in the field by qualified investigators. This could include sheriffs, state police, ODF&W biologists, wildlife services, or special contractors. And we've needed all of those at different times. Continuing collaring into phase 3, and all of these pertain to phase 3, by the way. Those particular packs that may come into conflict with livestock has a pretty broad spectrum, because when you look at Oregon and the landscape and what's already taken place, every wolf in Oregon will come into contact with domestic livestock. Those collars and that collar information serve us as producers, us as county commissioners, with the information needed in order to do non-lethal activities and to be effective with those non-lethal activities. They also identify those individual wolves that tend to be the ones that are depredating, instead of going to lethal take and not knowing which ones to target at that point. Management areas. I want to be clear that we asked for the establishment of management areas, knowing that this was going to be a long drawn out process, And in order to establish those, to give direction to the department so that in the next 5-year review, that is a discussion and put those into play. We know that we're in the 11th hour here, but the establishment and you guys giving direction. Lastly, the notification to county government officials, sheriff's department, the language in the current plan says as needed, and it is a needed basis where those are the first line of defense. Oftentimes the sheriff sets up the investigations, he contacts ODF&W biologists, we use the 911 services that they have to allow for after-hour services. So with that, I'm a little over time, and thank you.
That's all right. An elected official, and what you were saying was pertinent and the commission needed to hear. Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Nash? Todd, I have one. When you talk about management areas, are you referring to crafting out an area almost with like the individual plans with the producer?
No, to clarify, Commissioner Finley, we were thinking more in terms of management areas being something like management objective numbers that we have for deer and elk, so that not one area in Oregon became overburdened with wolves, so that it became subject to too much pressure on those wildlife ungulates in that area and an overburden to the livestock producers.
Okay. Any others, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Todd. All right, who's next? Okay, Mr. Boyce, Curry County Commissioner. Welcome, Commissioner.
Well, thank you, Board. Thank you for your distinguished service, your willingness to volunteer. Welcome from Curry County, Mary Wall. Very happy to have her on this commission board. I tend to get a little philosophical sometimes. Curry County has been hit with a variety of natural disasters, some not so natural. We're part of Region 6 in the Siskiyou, in the entire U.S. Forest Service system. And so within Northern California and Southern Oregon, we grow the highest quality, fastest growing trees in the world. We also have arguably some of the most beautiful rivers in North America, and we're very proud of that. That also produces some of the greatest salmon runs. What this means for my county, we had the first wolf kill listed as probable back in late February, where we lost 22 sheep, and it was the first claim or kill on the Oregon coast in almost 100 years. So as we have dealt with highway collapses and sinkholes and the two greatest forest fires in Oregon in the last 15 months, we're losing more and more resource, more and more beautiful parts of our Kalmiopsis wilderness area. And we have about a third left that hasn't burned out at least once in the last 30 years. So it's a huge, huge concern for us. What creates these mega fires is a loss in deer population. You can see that in California, deer and elk. They're down arguably, statistics suggest as much as 40%. There's a variety of things that are killing the deer in California, and you know what happened in Paradise, California. So as it affects my county, another predator, and I'm not here to argue against the plan or for the plan, but you introduce another predator that may arguably not even be a native species or a native wolf. If you talk to Native American folks down there, friends I've had for years, it's a bigger wolf, and it's interbred with different species, and it is a real concern for my citizens. So as we lose our deer population, our deer eat 7 pounds of ladder fuel, ground fuel, what the professionals call the 1-hour fuels. Elk eats generally about 20 to 25 pounds a day. So these non-natural fires, which we can all agree, the normal fire burns, normal burn cycles are part of a healthy balance to our forest, but that's not what we're having right now. So anything that, this is just one aspect as a county commissioner and the citizens I represent, just one aspect of losing additional deer population and elk. It is really a concern that we have. And so we have our territory down there is part of Region 6, but Northern California and Southern Oregon should be their own national region because it's unlike due to the wild, the ruggedness, the terrain, the dense forest that we have. As you had heard staff mention earlier today, the rogue pack, they can't find them. They are smart animals, as you all well know, and they go deep into that forest. I don't know how we'll get them collared. I don't know how we'll be able to manage properly. We spend thousands of dollars every year for visitor promotion, and then we want to possibly say, you can't go to the backcountry, you can't take your families back there, or even we possibly are going to hunt them eventually. So we need a little more time. I'm just getting involved in this. I'm very concerned about my ranch that lost 22 sheep. I'm happy to report that we have had no additional killings that I'm aware of. Concluding here, and thank you very much for the time. Number 4 on the AOC, I serve on that board, Association of Oregon Counties. Having a greater representation and connection, relationship with county government, the sheriff's department, et cetera, would be, I think is an area that can be improved. And so I'll be working towards that, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners? All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Chair Finley, Commissioners, I'll make one quick remark, essentially on this communication piece that Derek touched on during his presentation, and we've had a couple government officials touch on well. That is a real goal of the agency in stepping into the conservation and management of wolves, that we find ways to improve communication and improve on these partnerships and everyone's understanding of what it means to have this resource on the landscape. So I very much appreciate the folks that have come today, that have championed being on the other side of that table as we build that relationship and communication.
Well, thank you, Deputy Director. Okay. Mr. Murdoch, George Murdoch, Chair of the Board, Umatilla County. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. For the record, I am George Murdoch, chairing the Umatilla County Board of Commissioners. I am from Pendleton, Oregon. I represent the county that is usually at or near the top when it comes to wolf depredation. That being said, I do appreciate the comments that were made pre-break regarding the fact that we need to compromise and move forward. I'm also aware of the uphill climb we in Eastern Oregon often experience when it comes to getting our voice heard. We're an awful long ways away. A year ago, I attended a meeting of this board when the chair acknowledged the fact that the wolves belong to the state of Oregon and that the state has some responsibility for managing them, particularly when it comes to private property. I'm told that there are some who believe that the economic losses to agriculture could possibly be offset by ecotourism. First of all, I think that the people of Eastern Oregon would really prefer the right to frame their economic fabric themselves rather than having it done by others. Second, my son manages the largest cattle ranch in Umatilla County, and he spends all day, every day, covering hundreds of thousands of acres of private land, a portion of which is unusable because of wolves. In the past 3+ years, he's personally sighted one wolf, and that was a very brief incident, but I can assure you he has seen any number of mutilated calves. At one point in time, they hauled 28 loads of cattle off their private land in the middle of the summer because of daily depredation. So he knows what a calf looks like when it's had been attacked by a wolf. I can also assure you that in his job, his wolf sighting was nowhere near I-84 or any other road accessible to the public. So I think the idea that people could simply zip over to Eastern Oregon for a wolf viewing is kind of a ludicrous proposition. It's not likely that that's going to happen. They're probably more likely to see a bovine victim that probably didn't die in a humane fashion. I think the ranchers have borne a lot of the responsibility. I think they've acted in a humane fashion. I think you're moving towards what we feel is something of a compromise, and I think it's time that we did compromise. Just the other day, Senator Bentz commented that we're feeling like two wolves and a sheep are having dinner together and trying to decide who's going to be dinner. We feel a little bit like the sheep. But I'd also want to say, just for the record, I am not a hunter. I have never shot anything in my life. I don't even own a gun. But to be quite honest, I get sickened by picking up the pieces of our breeding program that have been desecrated, and I think it's time that we continue to move forward in a reasonable manner. Thank you very much. I might add, just for the record, I think there's a red light there and a green light here. So I'm not sure which one I'm following. But unlike Curry County, we are not suffering from an elk problem. The ranch my son works on feeds 4,000 head of elk. Last year they had $155,000 worth of damage from the elk. So there's not a shortage everywhere in Oregon. Thank you.
Hang on a minute, sir. Any questions? No, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start calling up a panel of three at this point. Steve Rogers, Jerome Rosa, and Suzanne Stone, I'm sorry. Misread that. So we have, this is an interesting panel.
It sure
The
is.
sheriff is going to have to keep order. We've got the cattlemen and defenders of wildlife at the same table.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. All right. Steve, we'll start with you.
Okay, my name's Steve Rogers. I'm the sheriff of Wallowa County. My office has been dealing with livestock, with investigating wolf livestock depredations for several years. As you know, my county has been a hotbed for livestock depredations. Early on, we partnered with our livestock producers, Wildlife Services, and ODF&W in crafting and implementing a protocol that dealt with investigations of wolves damaging and killing domestic livestock and dogs that are the personal property of our citizens. As I see you have mentioned in your the 2019 draft plan under strategies, because the distrust most of our livestock producers have with ODF&W, they requested the Wallowa County Sheriff's Office investigate the destruction of their personal property. I agreed to be involved in the investigations and agreed to do a professional and thorough job, and we have done that. We thought it was important for Wildlife Services to be involved and ODF&W to be involved for obvious reasons. At our Oregon State Sheriff's meetings, my office has put on trainings regarding this issue on numerous occasions, and most of the sheriffs attending have been interested in being involved in investigations when warranted. A resolution was passed with the Oregon State Sheriff's Association a few years ago addressing their willingness to investigate wolf livestock property destruction. I'm aware that there is incorrect information being disseminated to ODF&W regarding Oregon sheriffs not wanting to be involved in these investigations. Let me make it clear, we as Oregon sheriffs have every intention of being involved in investigating wolf livestock depredations. Our producers are demanding it. In your draft plan, you mentioned your protocol of investigations as to what livestock owners should do if they suspect depredation, and request an investigation that includes Wildlife Services, ODF&W, and United States Fish and Wildlife Services, or any combination of these agencies. First of all, you left out the Oregon Sheriff's offices. Secondly, Wildlife Services is not functioning in this capacity and are told not to get involved in wolf depredation investigations in Oregon and maybe other states for reasons surrounding a NEPA study issue or I suspect other political reasons. They are now of no use to our citizens where they once were. My citizens are keenly aware that their property destruction by wolves in Oregon and how it is investigated, determined, and reported. It is a political issue and they don't like it. Every time a wolf kills or damages their livelihood, they are financially impacted and seldomly compensated. ODF&W, and this is a quote, has no skin in their financial gain. And they see an agency set forth to manage an animal that was brought to the lower 48 states from Canada, and they understand the lack of willingness to destroy something the state is mandated to manage. When ODF&W members and even the governor's natural resources personnel who are not involved in the investigation and collecting evidence weigh in on the outcome, my producers distrust this process, possibly for good reason. Let me be clear, Oregon sheriffs who will deal with wolf livestock depredations will be involved in these investigations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Jerome?
Good afternoon, good morning, I guess it is, yeah. Chair Finley, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Jerome Rosa and I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. Agriculture is our state's second largest economic driver, and beef is the state's largest agricultural industry at nearly $1 billion per year. As the voice of the beef industry, OCA and its statewide membership of over 1,800 members has been an association for over 106 years. First of all, OCA would like to thank ODF&W in assembling the Oregon Wolf Plan. Our members throughout the state have suffered tremendous losses, both emotional and economical, since the decision to reintroduce wolves in Oregon was forced upon us. In spite of these emotional and economic hardships, the Oregon Cattlemen's Association stood alongside the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife from start to finish in the facilitated process of developing the Oregon Wolf Plan. OCA has held steadfast in three basic principles. One, management areas. No one area in Oregon becomes overpopulated and is burdensome to both wild and domestic ungulates. Maximum wolf numbers in each management area is yet to be addressed. Two, increasing collaring. Currently, the level of dollars on wolves in Oregon is woefully inferior. Producers' most effective non-lethal deterrent is location and knowledge of when necessary to protect their cattle. A minimum of one collar in each pack is a goal yet to be achieved. Three, real-time, on-the-ground, evidence-based depredation calls. Often depredation calls can take up to a week to occur, and this is a practice that must be improved if ranchers are to hold any confidence in the plan. Finally, do not underestimate the importance of this issue based on the limited size of our showing today. In a very tough economic time and beef prices having plummeted, the luxury of being able to drive often hundreds of miles to testify is just not economically feasible for most of our ranchers. Please take note that the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, though not content with many parts of the Oregon Wolf Plan, continues to work towards a future plan all Oregonians can live with on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. Suzanne?
Chair Finley and members of the commission, my name is Suzanne Aisha Stone, and I'm the Senior Northwest Representative for Defenders of Wildlife. Our Oregon representative, Srishti Kamal, will focus her testimony on our general wolf management plan comments. My comments are focused on our wolf and livestock conflict prevention program proposal that we submitted for your consideration on May 13th, 2019. Specifically, we're asking the commission to help establish a formal, proactive wolf and livestock conflict prevention program, and to also help address problems with the Oregon Wolf Compensation and Coexistence Program that lack That includes a lack of clear parameters to protect the program from possible fraudulent or non-priority misuse of funding. For the purpose of this testimony, I'm going to focus on our proposed wolf and livestock conflict prevention program. We've worked with the department now for over 20 years. We have over 30 years of experience working in conflict prevention and coexistence with wolves across the landscape, largely in the northern Rockies. We believe that Oregon is ready to expand its leadership in proactive wolf management and serve as an example for other states and even other countries in the development and leadership of a model that helps conserve wolves and minimize conflicts most effectively. Waiting until there's a depredation conflict often limits the ability to minimize conflicts, and by proactively preparing livestock owners and managers to avoid losses to wolves, this would help benefit everyone involved. While we applaud the response from ODF&W personnel to each depredation investigation, we believe that waiting until that depredation has occurred is often causing or losing an opportunity to work with those producers proactively to help them better protect their livestock. The program that we're talking about specifically would help promote, coordinate, and implement proactive, non-lethal conservation methods. It would provide technical assistance to landowners and livestock owners and managers regarding livestock husbandry and predator management, including grazing and herding strategies, birthing and carcass planning operations, carcass removal, wolf monitoring training, and the use of non-lethal tools and devices, and site risk evaluation. GPS data investigation can help predict the loss or the risk of depredation and help coordinate with training sessions for landowners, livestock owners, and resource professionals. The program staff would work with the local county wolf mitigation committees to help advise and evaluate the use of state funding for non-lethal measures, outreach, and planning. We believe that this program offers a lot to the state of Oregon in a way that ensures that Oregon continues to be both a thought leader and an example to other states on how to manage wolves most effectively. And after working with producers across the region, the western United States, we know, hearing from them directly, that this program would have been very helpful to help them avoid having losses in the first place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckmaster is first, and then Commissioner Atkinson.
I would like to thank you all for your testimony. I specifically would like to thank Suzanne and Jerome as two of the group of interested people who reached out and spent time talking to me about their positions over the last few weeks. It was informative. It was detailed. It gave us more time than the 3 minutes at the instigation of our chair. I did reach out. I sent an email and got some great responses. You two will be the first of several that I talked to, and I just wanted to issue a blanket appreciation for you spending your time with me. Thanks.
Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you for your time on the commission.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks. Holly, do you have a question? Or
Yes,
comment?
I had a question for Suzanne. I liked what you had to say about the wolf livestock conflict prevention plan, and I see that that could be really valuable for sharing information, like you had previously described to me, some of the meetings in Eastern Oregon where livestock producers can share information. Seems like one of the impediments is funding, and I was just wondering, does Defenders of Wildlife offer any kind of a grant program where, say, a group of livestock producers could apply for travel money to go, say, from Wallowa County to southwestern Oregon to share knowledge and experience?
Commissioner Finley and Commissioner Atkinson, yes, we have offered that in the past, and we've even provided funding for producers from northeastern Oregon to go to Montana to actually see people that have had decades now of experience of living with wolves. Probably one of the most effective examples is in the Tom Minor Basin, where you have one of the highest concentrations of wolves and grizzly on cattle ranching operations, probably in North America. It's an incredible place, right on the outskirts of Yellowstone National Park. And their experience in using non-lethal measures has demonstrated far beyond that of what has been done in the past or what's being done on adjacent ranching operations, that these non-lethal proactive measures actually reduce losses and they stay reduced over time. It's a sustainable program. So getting that information directly from the ranchers that are applying them on the ground is one of the most valuable things we can do. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Quick question. Suzanne, could you just describe just a little more detail? I don't want to take too much time with it, but some of the methodology of the training from I don't know a lot about it. What I understand, it's for lack of a better term, sort of livestock behavior modification. And so, for those that aren't familiar with it, could you just give just a quick summary of that, please?
So the Chair Friendly, the commissioners, we are a participant helping to facilitate some of the training operations that have occurred in and across the state in the last year. Those are primarily led by folks from the ranching community. So this is a different type of program than what we're proposing right now. It's almost like getting your foot in the door to help them understand from those other ranchers how they're using these techniques in other places. But the program that we're trying to propose right now is that we would like to see a proactive program that allows experts within the non-lethal and herd management to work with producers on the ground on a site-specific basis so that they're able to actually see the site where the potential depredations could occur and make recommendations and help train people in the use of those tools and techniques so that we're not waiting for a depredation to occur, but being proactive about doing it so we can avoid those depredations. And many of the depredations that have occurred in Oregon could have been avoided under those circumstances.
And I know, as Commissioner Atkinson alluded, the cost of this to do on a widespread basis has been a concern. Do you think that a more focused pilot program that would maybe focused on areas of highest wolf population or depredation could be more feasible, just from a funding standpoint, the top 5 ranches that are most at risk, or something like that?
Right.
Could you address that?
Chairman Finley, members of the commission, I believe that a pilot program would be a great way of field testing this, and that there's plenty of opportunity for doing in places like Baker County, where we have producers that have been living with wolves and ones that are just starting to experience living with wolves on the landscape. Be a great place to try it. But I think that if you look at the cost of the non-lethal measures versus the cost of lethal control, and use Idaho as an example, we're spending millions of dollars in Idaho on killing wolves and almost nothing on these non-lethal prevention tools. It should be the other way around. Yeah. Or not millions, but you know what I mean.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
I don't think, I also was taken with what my colleagues have mentioned on the possibility of doing more on the non-lethal and possibly a standalone program, as Commissioner Woolley says, a pilot project. We have ample precedent for setting up ongoing groups to work on a specific problem or challenge that's going to stay with us over extended periods of time, be it, many of them have statutory funding mechanisms that address the funding issue, things like the R&E board and the A&H and et cetera. Something like this, a pilot that our staff can work on, and I've talked to staff after I read your letter and I actually talked to the governor's office on the possibility of their support for that a pilot project. I don't think it's something that needs to be or should be included in our vote on a plan today, but at some point, at the chair's direction, I would like to poll the commission to see whether we should direct staff to frame a pilot project and how that might work, how it would be staffed, who would participate, how long it would go for, and get our approval to move on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I may.
Yeah, please,
Okay.
Deputy Director.
I promise not to do this with every panel, but Sheriff Rogers, I just want to thank you for coming today. You're right. We have had conversations with the Association of Sheriffs and their involvement in these investigation and depredations. As you'll hear if you can stay around today, that the conversation around who ultimately gets to do the investigations and confirm them will continue. But regardless of that conversation, having you and your staff, or in any county, the sheriff there, is very meaningful because you do have different relationships with landowners, and we very much appreciate that partnership. I'll also thank Jerome and Suzanne because they were part of the facilitated work group, and they did drive over several times across the state to be part of that. Your participation, I can't say thanks enough for. And so moving into two quick things that were brought up, collaring being one. We did express during that facilitated work group what Derek described as it is really tough to collar these wolves, and we want to set the expectation. We will continue to do that. We will continue to do that by the priorities on the plan, and we will share that information with any entity at a level that they need it at, so that they can operate effectively, both in their understanding of how wolves are being conserved in Oregon and how they are distributing themselves across the livestock, and what that means ultimately to landowners and folks making their living on the land. We are interested in that conversation about the livestock conflict depredation plan. I know Susan and Roblin Brown, who's our wildlife wolf biologist, have a very tight relationship there. That conversation has started. We very much appreciate that effort and you being there. For folks that don't know, during the facilitated work group, Suzanne brought in a template, basically, essentially of what is being used in other states on a landowner by landowner basis. And so we've kind of taken that into consideration as we look at helping landowners plan for wolves on their landscape. So thank you again, Suzanne, for that.
Just thank you, Deputy Director Hearn, for that, because I think it's been hard for us to know what the level of, I mean, we know staff have participated in these workshops and trainings, but it's been hard to get a gist of kind of what the department's thoughts are about them, and if there's any investment in our department in working more closely with that plan. And so, I mean, I partly disagree with Commissioner Buckmaster. I think it would be good to have, and we can talk about this later, but maybe just a reference to it in the plan. Obviously, it's something that we would have to, because we have all these other non-lethal methods mentioned in the plan, and I realize that those have been utilized for a number of years, and this hasn't in a directed way from us. But I think it could be helpful just to have an insertion that this is another consideration that we'd like to consider for the future, as the Commissioner said. Thank you.
Commissioner Akins.
Just one quick comment also on that same topic is, I think what is essential is that it is livestock producer driven from the local livestock community, because that's really the strength of the program, is not that we're telling somebody else what to do, but they are deciding what works for their operations and their area, and they want to engage with other livestock producers and learn about opportunities that might work for them. So I think we need to make sure it's driven by the producers.
Thank you.
You know, Jerome, I reached out, as I asked the other commissioners to do, and you and Todd Nash spent an hour with me on the phone, and I appreciate that. That was something that was important for me, and I think others reflected positively on the time they spent reaching out to both sides of the issue we talked to. So I asked the deputy director to speak to both the Sheriff Rogers' concern about maybe not being mentioned in the plan, but being a partner in the Sheriff's Association, because I wanted her to say that as the deputy director of the department. And same thing on the commitment to collaring. That's a direct link with the organization in the supervisory chain. And as deputy director, my experience has been that she's very good at following up. And so it was more comforting than to hear from the chair or one of the commissioners the commitment on the part of the department. So Commissioners, any other comment? Okay. Panel, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Finley.
Thank you.
Okay. I learned how to read, but some of you in your haste to sign up, if I butcher your name, it's really your responsibility and not mine. Diane Woney Lee, Rusty Ingus from Burns. I hope I didn't butcher your name, sir. And Mary Ann Cooper, Farm Bureau. Okay, Diane, we'll start with you. 3 minutes, please.
Kind of short here. Chair Finley, Commissioners, my name is Diane Lee. I'm just a great-grandma and a native Oregonian, and I'm here. I sat in 2005 when you had the town halls. I was at the meetings, and I don't remember anybody ever talking about using non-lethal procedures, because I don't think we even thought about that. Back then, we were so excited about getting wolves in the state that we didn't, I wasn't focused on that anyhow. And so I'm very proud and very happy with having wolves back in our state. And I would just like to say that I truly support the non-lethal procedures that have been implemented, that are prioritized, and I am glad to see them in this plan, that be continued, and that will be a high priority, and I appreciate that. And the only other thing is, I don't want to see Wildlife Services involved in any of the investigations. My personal feeling is they do not have the integrity that I want to see used by Fish and Wildlife. So with that, that's all I have to say. I just wanted to come and say thank you all for your hard work that you do, and know that we really appreciate having our wolves in Oregon.
Thank you. Okay, Rusty, you're next up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Chair Finley, Deputy Director Hearn, members of the commission. My name is Rusty Inglis. I ranch near Burns, Oregon, in the small community of Princeton. Yeah, and that's 300 and some miles from here. I'm the president of the Harney County Farm Bureau, the chair of the Oregon Farm Bureau Livestock Committee, and a longtime member of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. Today, you're going to hear from many livestock producers on what changes are needed to improve the existing Oregon Wolf Plan. But today, I want to talk to you about how the process should have worked. The process should have been just what the plan stated, a review of the current plan. Instead, it appeared to me that it turned out to be a rewrite. A review should have consisted of seeing what worked well and what didn't. The facts show that the plan was a success. We now have a viable population of gray wolves in Oregon. Based on ODF&W figures, we went from 14 wolves in 2009 to more than 137 wolves in 2018, with a 36% increase in breeding pairs. We have progressed from phase 1 to phase 3 in the Eastern Management Zone, and there's no doubt that we will move from phase 1 to phase 3 in the Western Management Zone. However, that success has come to a high cost to the livestock industry. Confirmed deprivation incidents by wolves increased by 65% last year. Higher stress levels on the cattle resulting in lower preg rates and decreased weight gains, and it is the family ranchers that are bearing all that cost. The changes to the plan that you're going to hear from the livestock community today have been well thought out and are drastically needed to protect the livelihood of the family ranchers here in Oregon, along with their rural communities. Ranching is a mainstay economic driver in most of rural communities here in Oregon. In Harney County alone, the livestock industry accounts for $60 million of livestock sales, providing 540 direct jobs and 360 indirect jobs. So whenever a ranching family experiences economic loss, the whole community loses. And Harney County's unemployment rate is pushing 6% already. So in closing, I ask you today to put politics aside and weigh in heavy on the changes the livestock community is asking. After all, it's the ranching community that has given the most, both economically and emotionally, to the existence of wolves here in Oregon. And we have stayed at the table during the entire process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mary Ann?
Chair Finley, Deputy Director Hearn, and members of the Commission, for the record, Mary Ann Cooper here today on behalf of the Oregon Farm Bureau. Oregon Farm Bureau is the state's largest general agricultural organization representing growers from across the state. Relevant here today, a lot of sheep and cattle producers. We've been engaged in the Wolf Conservation and Management Plan update since the update since 2015, and the plan since it was originally created in 2005. We've participated both in the informal and formal processes undertaken to update the plan, including the facilitated process and numerous other meetings. During this time, we always came to the table in good faith, looking to find the balance of wolf management that meets both the state's needs for conservation and our members' needs for increasing management flexibility as populations continue to grow across the state. We've always worked to find opportunities to build consensus around wolf management and a shared vision for wolf management in Oregon. We approach this task with one fundamental concept at the forefront, that the wolf management in Oregon has been a success. Wolves now occupy a statewide range with dispersal occurring from northeastern Oregon to the Oregon coast. And this follows the trend west-wide. To this end, we joined OCA and AOC in coming to the plan review with 3 primary requests that we believed would increase rancher tolerance for wolves while ensuring the continued conservation of the species. For the past 3 years, as I'm sure you all know, we have requested the local evidence-based determinations, depredation decisions, ensuring that local biologists could be in charge of both the review of depredation and the decisions on when to move to non-lethal. We believe this would normalize wolf management across the state and free up state resources as populations continue to grow across the state. We've emphasized the need for collaring, that we should continue to emphasize collars as we move into phase 3 management, with an emphasis on wolves that are most likely to be in conflict with livestock. And we've also emphasized the need for management zones so we can begin to know what population objectives we're working for, so we can know when we've achieved conservation success in different regions of the state and what conservation success looks like by region. While we are disappointed that we didn't get these changes that we asked for in the plan, we understand that the agency had a difficult job in balancing several competing interests and updating the plan in a way that will protect wolves while providing limited tools for ranchers to protect livestock and reduce conflict. Getting to some specific comments, I wanted to address the question raised earlier around why it's important to remain at 2 confirmed depredations. We've heard a lot of talk today about the importance of non-lethals. I think for us, especially as wolves are moving into the western part of the state where there is a lot more sheep, a lot more concentrated livestock populations, we want to make sure that if a rancher has done all of the non-lethals they need to do, if they have been proactive, that if there's a conflict and a wolf lingering in their area, they do have the opportunity after 2 confirmed depredations to look at and request lethal take. With my last 5 seconds, I will also note one of the questions we had around relocation is it's not apparent in the plan how that's different than translocation, and it's not immediately apparent that the County Commission will actually get notice and have the opportunity to weigh in on that. It provides that the County Commission can request a hearing, but it never says that they will actually get notified that relocation is occurring within their county. So that was a minor change we'd like to see addressed. And then also wanted some more guidance on what documentation of non-lethals looks like in the rule. We realize not everyone has the resources to create a plan, and that's a big burden for ranchers, so we're hoping that doesn't mean a physical plan, but rather that the rancher can continue to tell the biologist what they've done for non-lethals and that will suffice as documentation of non-lethals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to comment on translocation, dislocation about? Just getting commitments.
Yeah, what time is it? When's our budget going over? Chair Finley, Commissioners, to Mary Ann's point, yes, the notification would continue in any translocation, relocation discussion. However, I do think for everyone here, when Derek gets back up, we should describe those terms a little bit better for folks who haven't dug it as deep as you have into the plan.
So you got a commitment there.
Thank you.
Partially successful. Commissioner Buckmaster.
Good government.
Oh, okay. Thanks for yielding. Commissioner, good morning, Mary Ann. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Doing well. I wanted to express my appreciation for your point number 1 of emphasizing our local wildlife district staff in terms of identifying confirmed depredations. I'm aware that, and maybe Deputy Director could let me know where we're tracking on this. We proposed 5 additional biologists. District. wolf biologists specifically, in our budget, which I think is fantastic. And I don't know if there's like 3 east and 2 west. And so, I'm 5, yeah. So anyway, I'm hoping that we get all those positions and that they can be, get trained up and do a great job on confirming depredations one way or the other. So thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
Thank you all. And Marianne, you talked about things that the groups you represent and would have liked to see, but you understand. But then you had a couple smaller specific items that you would like to see in the plan. As commissioners, we are going to listen to public testimony. We're going to talk to staff again. We will deliberate and discuss amongst ourselves, and then make a decision today. So it would be extremely helpful on these items if you had language that you would like specifically to change, an amendment per se, that if a commissioner would like to pursue that in the proceedings today, they could go to you and ask. So if you have time to do that, and a commissioner is interested, and that goes for anybody asking for a specific change. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Wall.
Thank you. Marianne, a question for you. Could you talk just a little bit about how big a deal it is for your members, just speed or quick response? And I understand what you said already about 2 and 3 and that sort of thing, but set that aside for the moment. How important is just the timing of the response?
Commissioner Wall, it's very critical, and I think for us as populations begin to grow and we're looking for that normalization, we want to make sure that if somebody calls their local biologist, that they are, there's staff available for somebody to come out immediately. I think the big time lag has been, well, I think there has been some in confirmation of depredations, but in that decision to move to lethal, I think that that often is kind of going up to the top of the chain at this point before that decision's made. And meanwhile, you have somebody on the ground that feels like there's a major threat to their livestock, and they've had losses already. And I will note, because I don't think it's been entirely clear today, depredations are counted on event, not on number of livestock. And so as we get into especially the sheep regions of the state, those events could be very significant in terms of somebody's flock. It could be their entire flock. And so if you're looking at having had 2 events already and asking for a response before a third occurs, you could be in significant risk of losing the rest of your flock potentially. And so I think that's where we want to make sure that those determinations can be made timely and very quickly, so that again we get to that normalization of, I know there's an issue, I know I can call my bio and get it dealt with very quickly.
Thank you. And perhaps when the deputy director talks about the positions that we are hoping we get, you could also address that a bit.
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Woolley, Commissioner Wall, we did ask for 5 positions in the governor's recommended budget. That budget came out with those positions in it. What we've seen as far as our budget bill 5510, there are 3 positions. And so we were looking internally at where the best place to station 3 instead of 5. As you guys have heard from the stakeholders you've talked to, there is most of the population residing in that 1/3 section. So there is a huge workload there that we could throw some resources at. There is a significant workload coming on the west side as we move out of phase 1 over time. So those positions are meant to work with landowners. They are meant to be those boots on the ground, getting there quickly, making that investigation, and ultimately that determination that then does come up the chain once you meet that chronic threshold, depending on which phase you are, where we up here in headquarters make an ultimate decision on what action to take.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, panel.
Thank you.
Okay, our next panel is Sristi Camel, Ellen Marmon, and Sandra Wood. Okay, ladies, 3 minutes apiece, and we'll start with Sristi.
Good morning, Chair Finley and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today as you deliberate on the proposed changes to the Oregon Conservation and Management, Wolf Conservation and Management Plan. For the record, my name is Shrishti Kamal, and I'm the Senior Representative for Defenders of Wildlife in Oregon. Defenders was also one of the stakeholders that participated in the Wolf Plan stakeholder representative process. Suzanne Stone, my colleague, was at the table for that. Unfortunately, I'm here today because we feel that the outcome of the process was kind of predetermined, as the decision to initiate the rulemaking was made before the final meeting. But also the stakeholder process highlighted kind of a bigger underlying problem that we have with ODFW's approach with wolf conservation here, which has been so far to address conflicts by killing wolves after depredation has occurred, rather than focusing on preventing conflicts in the first place. We do not want dead livestock any more than the livestock industry does. And Defenders has been working with the livestock community to do exactly that. But we need more than that. We need more from the state to be able to help producers to learn how to live with livestock. My colleague Suzanne Stone has already gone through the details of the program, so I will not be repeating that. But I will definitely like to urge you to direct ODFW to prioritize non-lethal measures in the plan. And if there is a discussion on starting a pilot project or including a pilot project, then I would definitely like to urge you to include the mention of that in the plan itself and not leave it as a mere recommendation or a suggestion. One of our other main concerns with the plan is that it still remains the language that revolves around control hunting and control take. Specifically, that Section 3, where, and I quote, states control hunts require commission approval through the planning and hunt development public process. Just to note that here it refers to hunt and not take, and ODFW does make distinction between the two. And also, they did remove the language on special permit agents, but essentially kept the function of it, because, and again I quote, it states control take would be by ODFW special permit authorization. So that's essentially the same thing. So with 137 wolves in the state, it's kind of perplexing that the agency has put hunting on the table. The objective behind updating or revising a plan is to revisit the content, all of it. So the argument that this is already in the plan is kind of difficult for us to accept. And the final concern that we have is, again, regarding the standard for chronic depredation, which is defined in the current revision as 2 depredations in 9 months, which I find as being very not scientific and a very, very low bar. The term chronic, by definition, means something that is persisting for a long time or constantly recurring. And 2 instances of any event in any other circumstances would not have been considered chronic. So since the standard has direct implication on the life of a wolf and sometimes an entire pack, whether they live or they're killed, we ask for a more stringent standard for chronic depredation, one that actually adheres to the definition of chronic in its intensity and its frequency. So just in conclusion, when it comes to conservation of a species in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon has always looked at its neighbors for better examples or models. Unfortunately, in the case of wolves, even our neighbors are not doing a very good job. But that means that Oregon itself has an opportunity to be the role model for a change for the conservation of a keystone species.
You're out of time.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair Finley and Commission members. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Ellen Marmon. I am not one of the experts, but I am a lifelong Oregonian, and I come from a farm family. My grandparents protected their farm from all kinds of wildlife, from whether it was deer in the garden or raccoons in the chickens or coyotes in the sheep. And we all just assumed that that care was part of farming, sort of like dealing with the weather. I also know from personal experience what it feels like to lose an animal to a predator. My sheep all had names and personalities, and every one of them was important to me. And I understand the gut wrench and the heartbreak of going out and finding one of your beloved animals torn to pieces. So I do get it, I absolutely understand. But I also understand that wolves and apex predators have a really vital part in the wilderness that I cherish. They balance a healthy ecosystem. And experts have talked about the trophic cascade and wildlife management and stuff. For me, it's deeper than just statistics, and it's just deeper even than the science. For me, it goes to do with the quality of our wilderness here in Oregon. I want our wilderness to be wild. It's a precious legacy for all of us, and I believe that wolves are an important part of that. And that's one of those intangibles, kind of like that beautiful lifestyle thing and way of life for farms. I think our wilderness should be truly wild, and I think wolves is a good start to rewilding us. And for the record, I'm tickled pink that we now have wolves in Lane County. I think that's just the coolest thing. I'm concerned about a couple of provisions in the wolf plan. I worry about the definition of controlled take, and I understand that there has to be approval before that happens. But I worry about the potential for human error and the potential of too little control. And I'm also concerned about even the suggestion that we might consider wolves as game animals. Again, I worry about the potential for human error, and I worry about the politics. So I hope that you all continue to respect the science. I hope you all continue to protect Oregon's wolves. They are a precious resource, just like our farms, just like our forests. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Elst?
Thank you for having us here today and giving us a chance to speak. I'm here to talk in
I'm
support
sorry,
of
let me
wolves.
correct for the record. Sandra Wood, correct?
Yes, my name
Okay.
is Sandra Wood, and I currently live in Eugene. There have been wolf sightings in Lane County now, and it is very exciting to see the wolf population grow in Oregon. There are currently 137 wolves and 16 packs in our state, which is still a very small number. Wolves are a vital part of nature. We should continue to encourage farmers and ranchers to use non-lethal deterrents and learn to work with nature instead of trying to work against it. Years ago, when the first wolves were spotted in Oregon, I attended an Oregon Fish and Wildlife meeting in Albany. Those in attendance were told, wolves are here, they are going to stay here, and we need to accept that and learn to live with them. That attitude should still hold today. Please continue to protect our wolves. They are just as important as our other wildlife. My family is getting ready to move to Lorain. So far, we have spotted evidence of deer, cougar, elk, and coyotes, and even bear on our property. We hope to coexist with the wildlife, even if that should someday include wolves. Thank you for continuing to not allow wolf hunts in our state. Our wolf population does not support this, and the majority of Oregon citizens do not want our wolves hunted. I would also like for you to reconsider allowing private citizens, which would be hunters and trappers, to hunt and kill wolves. I feel this is a recipe for disaster and is just a way for wolf haters to exterminate wolves. Oregon has the 5th largest state elk population with approximately 125,000 elk. Wolves are not decimating elk populations as those who do not like wolves like to claim. In conclusion, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing wildlife. I have visited many national parks in this country and have gotten so much joy from seeing the wild animals. And I look forward to someday getting the opportunity to see wolves in this state. Let's continue to protect our wolves so that they will continue to grace our landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Buckmaster.
Thank you, all three of you. Srishti, on your May 13th letter, you talked about and made some pretty strong statements regarding the facilitators at the latest work group. You stated that Kearns and West staff were never empowered to do their job. And I am just curious what you base that on. Is that from Kearns and West? And I'm also going to ask staff if we have any input from Kearns and West, whether they feel they weren't empowered to do their job.
Chair Finley and Commissioner Buckmaster, this was our observation and not from Kearns Invest formally, if that was one of your questions. But the reason we felt that way was, although Kearns Invest was facilitating the meeting, most of the materials coming out or what were incorporated in the plan was drafted through ODFW. So as a third-party, unbiased facilitator, that should have been their role as well. ODFW was a stakeholder in the meeting as well, but they were also kind of the decision maker in this case because they were deciding on what gets incorporated from the meeting minutes into the revision of the plan.
Okay, did staff receive any feedback from Kearns and West?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, we did. We received feedback at every meeting. We also received a final report on how they felt they went. I mean, overall, to summarize it, I can provide those to you or anyone else who wants them. But overall, to summarize, they recognized going into it, it was a very difficult conversation. And I'll say, and this is me summarizing, when you have a facilitated work group with very scientific information, they knew going in that they were going to have to rely on the department for that. And so I don't think that was recognized early and often in that process, and that potentially was a conversation maybe we should have had so people's expectations were set at the start.
We'll have an opportunity to learn for the next one then. So I have one additional question for Srishti. You made the comment that with only 137 wolves in Oregon, known wolves, observed wolves, I should say, that it was too soon to include controlled hunting in the plan. And yet, in the 2005 plan, it was included with 0 wolves in Oregon. So if it was an okay with 0 wolves, and we now have 137, what changed?
Chair Finley and Commissioner Buckmaster, our stance has always been consistent that we, as an organization, do not support the hunting of wolves for various reasons, whether it's ecological, social, or economic. But what we are trying to say here is that we were, when the plan was put in place in 2005, this was with some presumptions and some preemptions of what changes would mean on the landscape when wolves are around, and if the population reaches a threshold that there is management measures that are required, then controlled take could be there, or through a controlled hunt. The language that was currently proposed, and as I quoted in my testimony here, specifically mentions controlled hunt, which is a non-targeted attempt of removing wolves versus controlled take. And that's, again, something that goes into the realm of opening a door for hunting, a controlled hunt season for wolves that is not necessarily in response to depredation. That's different. That's management measure and versus a controlled hunt to manage a population size, but not specific wolves. For controlled hunt, I mean.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, panel. Our next panel consists of Crystal Elston, Scott Beckstead, and Renee Tato. Okay, Crystal, we'll start with you.
Oh, Chair Finley,
Name and
Commissioners.
address for the record.
My name is Crystal Elston. I'm from Wilsonville. In reviewing the plan update and detailed response provided to the Commission by HSUS, I just wanted to say ditto. I agree with everything that they submitted. I am specifically concerned about the controlled take and opening to hunting and trapping. Trapping is heinous and cruel. It is also not very effective as it can trap animals that are the unintended target. These animals fight for their freedom. They're not able to defend themselves. They sustain catastrophic injuries. They suffer from psychological stress and pain, starvation, dehydration, and predation. They will languish for long periods of time until they die. Trappers are mostly concerned with undamaged pelts, but not quick and humane deaths. Some Hunters or trappers have reported to have strangled, drowned, and chest stomped animals caught in these traps to avoid damaging their pelts. The traps are indiscriminate. They often kill animals other than their intended species. The American Veterinary Medical Association does not consider kill traps to be humane. These traps do not always render a rapid or stress-free death. Other information shows that between 2 and 10 non-targeted animals are trapped for every target animal captured. Still, other information studies show that somewhere between 56 and 76% of lake-hold trap captures are not the target animal. The science demonstrates that killing wolves does not increase prey populations. I've read this repeatedly from various articles based on studies. The threat to livestock based on the published numbers when compared to other causes of livestock death seem negligible in comparison. I do not see the value in killing wolves, which negatively impacts the ecosystem and causes disruption and possible loss to existing pack families, for little to no reward for the greater good. I do not believe our wildlife and ecosystems need to pay a continuous debt and be put at risk in order to service hunters in an unproven belief that this assures abundant prey populations are available to them. And frankly, the world does not need commodified animals which are in abundance in order to create a biodiverse ecosystem. We need wolves for that. While I do not intend any lack of compassion for ranchers or hunters, I have a deeper interest in preserving our environment and wildlife, of which I'm very fond of and which we are dependent upon. At this time in our civilization, we have accelerated species extinction to an unprecedented rate, and we are staring the ramifications of global warming in the face. It's going to get worse. We have much more to lose as humans when our environments lose the creatures that provide the balance we need for biodiversity and healthy ecosystems. According to a scientist, William Ripple, who is an ecologist at Oregon State University, we are just uncovering the critical role that wolves and other predators serve in our ecosystem at the same time their populations are declining and are at risk. As there are a variety of non-lethal...
Time to sum up.
I have 2 more sentences.
All right.
As there are a variety of non-lethal methods proven to be more effective at protecting livestock, and due to the negative impact removing wolves will cause and the unnecessary cruelty to sentient beings through trapping, I am not in support of these changes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Scott.
Thank you, Chair Finley, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Scott Beckstead. I'm the Rural Outreach Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I live in Sutherland, Oregon, in North Douglas County, and I'm here today to express our concerns with the new Oregon Wolf Plan. I hope you'll take a moment to review the comments that we submitted. They are lengthy and in-depth and very comprehensive, and I won't even try to summarize them here. But what I want to do is really to go straight to the heart of why the Humane Society of the United States has some serious reservations about the wolf management plan. And it really has to do with the provisions in the plan that allow or pave the way for trophy hunting and trapping of Oregon's small and vulnerable population of wolves. And what we have seen in other states is that many in the wolf hunting community do not behave like the kind of hunters that we typically think of. For example, a hunter that goes out in the fall to take a deer or an elk. There is an element of hatefulness, of sadism and cruelty directed toward the wolves by this community. You can find chat rooms of Idaho hunters where they boast about killing wolves in a way that causes the animals to suffer as much as possible. Photographs of hunters gathered together wearing Ku Klux Klan style white hoods while posing with a dead, very heavily pregnant wolf. Photographs of trappers grinning while they sit next to a wolf that's caught in a steel-jawed leg-hold trap. This is the kind of behavior that maybe it's acceptable in a state like Idaho or a state like Wyoming, but it will never do in Oregon, and Oregon will never stand for that kind of behavior. And unfortunately, it feels like that is exactly what this plan might be paving the way for. We are not Idaho, we are not Wyoming, we are Oregon, and we value our wildlife for its own sake. And so for these reasons, I do hope that you will take a look at our comments, and for these reasons, we oppose the plan as written. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Renee?
My name is My name is Renee Tatro. I live in Lake Oswego. Thank you very much for listening to my testimony. I'll try not to recapitulate many of the good points that were already made. I'm a hunter. I'm an NRA member. Every year I harvest a buck, and every other year I take an elk. And I know that the biggest threat to our ungulate population of deer and elk is not wolves. It is us. It is our imposition on those ungulates' natural habitat. It's climate change. It's the diseases that our domestic animals spread. That's the threat, not the wolves. And while I'm not an elected official, I think I'm pretty typical of a lot of Oregonians. We hunt, we fish, but at the same time we venerate our natural resources, and we try to learn to preserve them for the benefit of the greater good and not just some subset of the Oregonians. This is not 1819 or 1919, when solutions to any conflict between natural predators and humans had one solution, and that was wipe out the predators. We've gone past that. We're in 2019, where the science has now shown us the folly of that approach, where technology and good old human intuition have given us a plethora of non-lethal ways to deal with those conflicts and to manage those conflicts without taking the life of these predators. Now, I grew up in Kansas. We didn't have wolves in Kansas. Closest I ever came to a wolf was hearing my dad tell the story about how the last wolf was killed in Kansas, and that was a pretty sad thing. And I'm not a scientist, but I've spent a great deal of time trying to learn about wolves. And the one thing that I have not heard in any comments today, but is true, and that is that one animal has a species, one species has a role for the male animal and the female animal that are approximately equal in raising a young. And I bet if I went out on the street or in any place other than the context of this hearing and asked people, what animal is it? They'd say orcas, lions, great apes, chimpanzees, but they would be wrong. It is the wolf. The wolves are the only animal where that takes place. And so if you think about taking the father out of a family like that, and the destruction of the social milieu that takes place, think about it. I know that wolves aren't humans, but you take a father out of a family, you send them on military duty or incarcerate them, that disrupts the whole milieu of that family. And that's what happens when these wolves are taken in the context of depredation. I know that I'm out of time, but I have 2 points that I really want to address quickly. One is the definition of chronic. I think that that's the linchpin of much of the mischief that can come from this plan. I don't know of any situation where 2 instances in a 9-month period over an animal that lives 10 years would be considered to be chronic. If I cough twice during these few minutes, you wouldn't say I'm a chronic cougher. If I have 2 drinks in 9 months, you wouldn't say I'm a chronic drinker. I've had horses buck me off twice in 9 minutes, and they weren't chronic buckers. And I think that definition needs to be addressed. And the other thing that I think needs to be addressed, and that is eliminating the public hunters in this process. And Chairman, I have one last thing to add from a gentleman who couldn't be here, Carl Safina, who is an internationally known ecologist and author. He's given TED Talks, founded the Safina Center, which is given a body of science to give voice to nature. He couldn't be here, but he asked me to read a couple of sentences, and it's very short. This is from Carl Safina. It said, research shows that plans to kill wolves are mainly counterproductive because intact packs tend to stay away from livestock, while shattered packs tend to focus on it. Coexistence is possible, and by using a very few effective techniques, keeping wolves away from livestock most of the time is possible. That last was from Carl Safina. Thank you very much for indulging that last piece.
Commissioner Buckmaster, Commissioner Aikenson follows.
Thank you all for your testimony. I am compelled to comment on a statement from Scott from HSUS. the idea that morally reprehensible behavior, as illustrated by a small group, however many people, might somehow be okay in a different state, in Idaho, Wyoming. I hope that if somebody went in front of one of their Fish and Wildlife commissions and described something and said maybe that's okay in Oregon, that one of their commissioners would stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not okay anywhere. The majority of people, the vast majority of people in Idaho and those states that you referenced find morally reprehensible behavior, morally reprehensible, and I didn't appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Atkinson?
Yes, I have a question for Scott. You mentioned that that you felt that this update on the plan paves the way to trophy hunting of wolves. And I know you are well aware that in 2005, our plan had controlled take, and our current 2010 plan has controlled take. What do you see as different between then and now, what's being proposed? I don't see a big language change, but perhaps you're seeing something I don't see.
Thank you. Chair Finley and Commissioner Atkinson, we have always opposed the portion of the plan that allows for the controlled take of wolves. And this has always been our position with respect to this plan. With respect to Commissioner Buckmaster's comments, I'm a native Idahoan. I grew up on a farm in Idaho. I killed bull elk and deer in central Idaho. And I can tell you that the values that I was raised with are very different from the values that I've seen among some in the wolf hunting community. And I believe that the Idaho body would find that behavior reprehensible. And in fact, we saw when a commissioner posed with some dead baboons, the governor asked for his resignation. I did not mean to suggest that the values are any different. What I'm trying to convey here is that we cannot let that kind of depraved cruelty take root here in Oregon. Thank you for allowing me to address that.
So I'd like to follow up. I don't think you really answered my question. You said that this update paves the way to trophy hunting, but then you went on to say that your organization has always been opposed to controlled take. But is this plan any different than the past plans? Because we're hearing from people, oh, hunting is new, and this plan is proposing hunting, which has never happened before. And I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure, and Commissioner Atkinson, perhaps I was inartful in my statements, but I suppose that part of the reason why this is speculation on my part, but part of the reason why you're hearing more and more concern is because we're now in phase 3. And I think that wolf advocates, including those within my organization, have always opposed the idea that Oregon wolves would be hunted and trapped.
Thanks for that clarification.
You bet.
Okay. Okay, thank you, panel.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson? You're up next. Jim Atkinson and Eric Colville. Mr. Nelson, we'll start with you if you state your name and address
Okay.
for the record. And let's see, Jim, and we have Mr. Colville?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, gentlemen, 3 minutes. We're going to start the clock. And Commissioner Atkinson, if you're not happy with his statements, we'll cut him off at any time.
Chair Finley, Deputy Director Hearn, and members of the commission. I'm Verl Nelson, a rancher and a retired agriculture science teacher from Douglas County. I have taught many classes in agriculture, including forestry and wildlife management, for 25 years. I am the Western Oregon co-chair of the Wolf Committee for the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. According to the current plan, all the economic burden of wolves on the Oregon landscape are borne by ranchers. We suffer killed animals, weight loss, reproductive failure, and have the burden of labor and responsibility and the cost of non-lethal controls. Most of the ranchers I know work from daylight to dark. This is an added burden. A recent study in Idaho indicated many unforeseen impacts of wolves on ranchers, including stressed livestock more prone to sickness, post-traumatic stress disorder similar to soldiers, poor use of the forage because cattle refuse to go in areas inhabited by wolves, cattle attack stock dogs because they see a canine and they're protecting themselves. Additionally, deer and elk herds have moved into ag lands for protection. Wolf advocates will say that's okay because ranchers are compensated. That's not true. Ranchers get compensation for confirmed and probable kills by wolves, but the bar is set so high for confirmed kills, only a small percentage of wolf kills are actually confirmed. Some cattle are killed by being run to death and show no signs of attack. Ranchers in wolf areas experience 60 to 100 pounds less weight on calves, 150 pounds less weight on cows, 10% reproductive failure on cows. No compensation is allowed for those losses, which are much greater than the animals that they kill. Last year, loss requests in Oregon were 500,000. Only 114,000 was paid. One rancher in Wallowa County requested $51,460 in losses and only received $6,889 in compensation. Ranchers in Douglas County are worried about wolves interfering with livestock production and are looking at other crops to raise. Much of the land is private lands and is only suitable for pastures and livestock. If we can't protect our livestock and ranchers have to quit producing, they fear land values will drop and land will be non-productive. I understand most Oregons are interested in the Oregon Farm Heritage Foundation and keeping agriculture lands in ag production, rather than in commercial or residential use. How do we do this if ranching is not economically viable business? The proposed plan needs to be less protective of wolves and more protective of livestock. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Akins.
Yes, thank you, Chair Finley, Commissioners, Deputy Director Hearn. I consider it a privilege to be addressing you on this topic. Spent a lot of time on this topic professionally, over 20 years actually, in dealing with wolves. And I echo some of the things that Holly mentioned before the break, and that is we're at a real crossroads here in our state. And there's no reason why through compromise we can't come up with something that works for everybody. And I also want to leave my script here a little bit and talk about hunters. I think this building's here right now, and you're all in front of us because of the contribution of hunters over time. So things need to be kept in perspective. We are conservationists, starting with Teddy Roosevelt and many others of that age bracket. And keep in mind, we care about all wildlife species, including wolves. Wolves are a big part of our state now. But like so many other wildlife resources, they really need to be managed sensibly. And that's what this is all about. And as a representative of the Oregon Hunters Association, I was a participant in the facilitated stakeholder meetings. I thought they were very good meetings. What a difficult undertaking for Deb Noodleman to be the facilitator on a meeting on such a controversial topic. I think she did a very good job. And I also would like to say thanks to the staff that were involved, Shannon, Kurt, not Kurt, but I guess Kurt was there some, as it could be.
Don't give it.
But Doug and Derek and everybody, and Kevin too, I think did an exceptionally good job. I'm just speaking from my heart here because basically our organization supports this plan. And we recognize that there's been a lot of compromising from all different perspectives that have gone into this thing. And we can move forward with this. We can effectively manage wolves moving ahead. I don't want to get into specifics. I want to keep this at a 20,000-foot level. And because I think the decision that you all are going to make today should be done at that level. Because it's a concern not only for our wildlife resources, the economy of the citizenry of our state, but just so many variables. And it's not just one specific thing, such as is hunting ethical or appropriate at these low numbers? Is trapping hunting or trapping ethical? We're looking at some pretty big scale topics here. Let's keep it at this level. And I really encourage you to follow through and support this very well-written and accomplished management plan for wolves in our state. 1 second over.
You practiced.
No, I didn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Koval.
Good morning. My name is Eric Colville. I live in Salem. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, have been my whole life. I'm also a member of the Oregon Hunters Association. After hearing the presentation and considering the information, I'm convinced that the April 2019 draft of the Wolf Plan represents responsible stewardship of the resources that we have in this state. And it's also represents the necessity of needing to balance the needs of the many occupants of our environment. So on that basis, I support the April 2019 Wolf Plan and would urge the adoption by the Commission. Thank you.
Commissioners. Commissioner Wall.
I'd like to echo some of the thanks that have been given to people in this room who gave time on the phone and that sort of thing, and Jim Atkinson is one of those people. It's perhaps the case that people in this room gave me more time on the phone figuring out how to think about this plan than I even spent reading about it. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you, panel.
Chair Finley, could I
Yes,
make
sir.
one other comment?
Yes, you may.
Wildlife Services has kind of been bashed in this meeting, and I can tell you Wildlife Services in our area is invaluable. Our ranchers, a lot of them would not be in business without Wildlife Services. The other thing I'll say is, as a group, and our regional director down there, we worked a deal with one of the conservation groups that want wolves and want non-lethal use, and they're contributing in southwestern Oregon $25,000 for non-lethal and assistance in hiring a person to put up non-lethal and to fund part of the non-lethal. And you know, the other part of Wildlife Services beyond, you know, we expect them to remove some coyotes that are preying on our sheep and our livestock and mountain lions and those kinds of things. And they're good at that, but they're also very good at educating ranchers as to how we can manage differently so that we don't have the depredation. And I want you to know I really appreciate Wildlife Services and their value to our industry and to the general public.
All right, thank you. Jim?
Could I follow that up on Wildlife Services? Decades ago.
You guys aren't paid, are you?
No, but decades ago, when many of the states were getting into capture and radio collaring of wolves, the leaders in training those of us who were involved in that, I happen to be involved in it in Idaho along with Holly, we were trained by trappers from Wildlife Services. And these guys have been actively engaged in this game right from the get-go. And they've been a major contributor. And I think they can really be valuable with their expertise, and we need to call upon that, particularly at these sorts of times. That's all I have to say.
All right, well, thank you, panel. Our next panel is James Dundon, Georgia Weir, and Sue Adams. Well, Mr. Dundon, we'll start with you, please. Your name and address for the record.
My name is James Dundon. I live in West Salem, here in Oregon. And I am a lifelong resident and hunter-angler in Oregon. Chair Finley and Assistant Director and Commissioners, I want to remind you that as a hunter-angler, I'm one of the guys that keeps the lights on here. And my tax money goes to taking care of wolf research and apparently red fox research too.
Thank you for that.
It doesn't take a PhD to know that wolves are continuing to increase and expand in Oregon. That in those states that allow hunting and trapping, wolf populations remain viable. That they're clearly no longer threatened or endangered in Oregon. We see an annual increase every year, and I'm convinced that next year at this time we'll be talking about more wolves over more of Oregon. And based on that, I support adoption of the draft proposal that's before you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Georgia?
Chair Finley and members of the commission, I'm Georgia Ware from Portland. And I came to testify today because I want you to know about Oregonians like me. We are not wolf experts, and we aren't even regular wolf advocates. But we want our Fish and Wildlife Commission to protect Oregon's wolves so that these majestic animals can live with their families in the forests or elsewhere in the state in as close to a natural condition as possible. We do not want members of the public to be authorized to hunt or trap wolves at all. Lately, I've been listening to and reading the scientific information that I know you've been reading too, because I asked to get the letters that you, one of the letters that you received. And what is clear to me is that we humans need wolves. They help maintain balance among their fellow plants and animals in the wild. They even prevent disease from spreading. They may need us now, but we and our children will be the ones who will suffer if we don't protect them. For this and other reasons, I am against the draft Wolf Conservation and Management Plan update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Adams?
Chair Finley and members of the commission and Deputy Director Hearn. My name is Sue Adams. I grew up in a rural area on a farm in Southern Oregon. I currently live in Portland, Oregon. And thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I do have concerns with the draft Wolf Conservation and Management Plan update. I join the 60 to 70% of Oregonians and more than half of rural residents who support continued protections for wolves. And I am against the public hunting, a general hunt of wolves. I think that in these days of climate crisis, apex predators such as wolves have been proven by scientific research to be a stabilizing force for the ecosystem. And our OSU Professor William Ripple has done a lot of work in national parks on this issue. With wolves in the area, elk and deer populations are under control, and then native vegetation thrives. And as the native vegetation thrives, the streams and riverbanks become stabilized and shaded, and then the fish thrive in the deeper and cooler waters. And then amphibians, reptiles, insects, birds, other types of wildlife move in because the environment has been enriched. And then the beaver move in to further work their magic of restoration. So I think these processes are very important for our environment. And I ask the Commission to please protect the wolves and Oregon's environment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners. All right, panel. Thank you for coming. Our next panel consists of Emily Ayu, Dave Wiley, and Al LePage. Is Emily here? There you are. Okay. Emily, we'll start with you, if you'll state your name and address for the record.
Hi there, my name is Emily Ayu, and I live in the Old Willamette area of West Lynn. And I'm here today. I am the State Director for Animal Wellness Action, and my position is volunteer. And I'm here today because I deeply care about the wildlife in our state and the intrinsic value of wolves. Years ago, when I was a student of environmental history and philosophy at PSU, I was profoundly affected by the writings of Aldo Leopold. And he, in a Sadin County Almanac, he writes about an experience hunting wolves in the 1930s. And that is just what they did. And upon shooting a wolf, he got over to it in time to see the light go out of its eyes. And he writes about kind of having an epiphany of this intrinsic creature removing a vital part of the mountain, that the mountain kind of grieved when, and he did, when he saw the light go out of this wolf's eyes. And I was just very profoundly affected by studying his writings. And I think he was part of the U.S. Forest Service, Mr. Leopold. So I don't really have anything to add other than with everybody else has really said a lot of my concerns here, but I do want to reiterate that wolves are threatened in losing their endangered species status, the federal ESA, and so I think it's very important that we protect Oregon's wolves because of that threat. And so, yeah, we are very, very concerned about the trophy hunting wolves. There's something very disturbing about trophy hunting and trapping a species that was hunted to extinction. So thank you for hearing my comments today, and wish you all a good weekend.
Thank you for coming. Mr. Wiley.
Chair Finley, members of the Commission, Assistant Director Hearn, my name is Dave Wiley, and I live in Sublimity, Oregon. I'm a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and a volunteer for them, and I'm here today to speak on their behalf. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has submitted written recommendations prior, so I will summarize and supplement. Let me just state that Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has been around for 35 years. It's got about 234,000 members nationwide. This past year, we've crossed 7,400,000 acres of wildlife habitat. We fund research and at state, university, state, and federal. And we have been the prime facilitator for the restoration of elk to 7 states and one Canadian province. So we have a bit of credibility, I would hope. Here in Oregon, in those same 35 years, we've grown to 17,000 members, and we've improved or protected 800,000 acres of habitat. Now, RMEF supports the plan before you today, the April draft Wolf Conservation and Management Plan, and we recommend it to you for adoption. It's not perfect, but it is a very, very good plan that builds upon 16 years or more of experience in wolf management here in the state of Oregon. Now, Rocky Mountain Elk, and I personally represented them, have been participating for multiple years, many years, in this planned collaborative process. As you saw, I think it began about 2016 or before. And I was present representing Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation at the facilitated meetings. And so I think I can speak with a degree of directness here. This plan represents collaboration. Some people didn't get their way, and that's life. We didn't get all we asked for. The bottom line is that this plan is science-based, provides for adaptation, is reasonable, prudent, includes the Oregon experience, and is likely to be more effective than the one it replaces. And the one that it replaces has restored wolves to Oregon, and their population continues to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Mr. LePage.
Chair Finley, Commissioners, Deputy Director Hearn. Envision. Envision a world where all life, wild and human, is served. Envision a world where people understand, value, and conserve the diversity of life on Earth. A world that believes in the intrinsic value of the natural diversity of organisms, the complexity of ecological systems, and the resilience created by evolutionary processes. And where human-caused extinctions and the destruction and loss of function of natural ecosystems are unacceptable. A world where maintaining and restoring biological diversity, the variety and variability of life in terms of genetics, species, habitats, and ecosystems, are individual and collective responsibilities of humans. Envision a world where collaboration among scientists, managers, policymakers, and other stakeholders is vital to incorporate high-quality science into policies and management decisions. Envision an agency whose primary mission has been serving humans through wildlife management by actively modifying habitats or attempting to control various species populations becomes a new agency, one focusing on serving wildlife through conservation biology, and their new primary mission being to protect, preserve, and enhance its biodiversity based upon the principles of ecology. Envision an agency that values, establishes, upholds, promotes, practices, and applies professional scientific standards of excellence for conservation science and based on a process of publication and peer review outside of the agency itself. Envision a commission that develops policy with the primary purpose to serve wildlife, habitat, and ecosystems. A commission that approves policy and plans based solely on science, on ecology and conservation biology. Envision a commission that begins the process to make this major transition from an agency of wildlife management into an agency of wildlife conservation. Envision a commission that shares these visions and acts upon them. A commission that begins doing so today by not only taking actions that would maintain strong protections for wolves, protections that would not only prevent but also end the killing of wolves, protections that would move this agency forward towards making all these visions a reality for all wildlife. Envision.
Thank you very much. Commissioners. All right. Thank you, panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break now for lunch, And so I know some of you are going to go off-site, so we're going to come back at 1 o'clock. That's a little over an hour and 5 minutes. And so we'll be in here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.